But the onus remains on every person to report, and nowhere does the law exempt the Catholic Church and the Catholic confessional. The Church cannot deem itself to be above the law and above our Constitution. We need the law to acknowledge this and to actively disclose childhood sexual abuse, whether by its own clergy or any member of the Church who otherwise is privy to the sanctity of the confessional. In closing from myself and before introducing William, it is disturbing that there's a narrative from within the Church saying that the flesh was tempted, because that is basically putting the blame on the children and shifting the blame to the children, because these men, despite of their vows of chastity, cannot control themselves around children. We are losing faith in our faith, and the blame that should be put at the foot of the Church, whose moral compass needs to be looked at urgently. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, William Sigudisha.
Thank you. Towera means good morning to everybody. I'm a very guy. My name is William Sigudisha. I'm from Polokwane in Limpopo. I'd like to thank you all for coming here. I wish truly that we were meeting here under different circumstances. With something more positive to talk about. It's not easy for me to talk about this. Hence, I've kept silent for almost 3 decades. But I'm not getting any younger. As I get older, life is unpredictable. I would hate to take this with me to the grave. So hence, I've made a conscious decision to come out into the open and break the silence and tell the very solid story of what happened to me some 27 years ago. I'll start from the beginning so you have a picture, a background idea of who I am and how I came to be in the position that I was in. I'm a little bit nervous. I'm not used to the press, and I'm normally a shy person, so you would all bear with me if at times I stay silent for a while to regain my composure. I was born in a township called Seshego in Polokwane. I was born in 1972 then. And at the age of around 10, I was already, as was the norm then, politically conscientized, so that I became an activist at a young age due to circumstances that were prevailing in those days. And so during my first year of high school, I had my first real baptism of fire under the hands of the then Leboa Homeland Security apparatus. I and other student activists were in the forefront of organizing the June the 16th commemoration. As you know, it was something that we customarily did in every township across the country. When June the 16th was nearing, the townships across South Africa went on fire. And in the process, I got involved in what the then government would call an act of terror, in that we burned down vehicles belonging to the Lebowa government and their offices a few days before the commemoration, because on the actual day they are alert, the military, the police. So we decided to add an element of surprise and do our thing before the actual day. As a result, we were hunted down one by one. The unlucky ones got arrested, and you know what happened when you were arrested by those guys. They did not play. Yeah, so me and a few guys
pleasure to stand before.
Mostly white again, because white people have money then as they do today. So we help them with their groceries and packing them into their cars in exchange for those few cents. So one day, I met this white lady, and she took pity on me, and she was curious to know who I was, where I came from, why I was on the streets, and I opened up to her and told her my story. And so she told me about a shelter for street children which had recently been opened in Hillbrow, where she could help me get a place there. They were not just taking any other kids. They were kids who were beyond redemption because of their usage of drugs and other substances. So this shelter wanted to accommodate those kids who still had potential to can be rehabilitated and taken to schools, be they technical schools or if they were academically inclined, normal schools. And so she invited me to come to that shelter. And a few days later, I decided to go and give it a try. So I went to the shelter. The name of the shelter was Streetwise Children's Home, which was located just opposite what they now call the Women's Gov Constitution or something. Is it constitutional? As you go into yes, right opposite it. And after the interview, they interviewed me. They welcomed me. Said I was welcome to stay at the shelter, and they gave me a bed, gave me clothes, and so I was enrolled into that shelter. The shelter had a program. We, according to our ages, we were separated. According to our ages and abilities, we were separated into allocated into separate classes. We had volunteer teachers, professionals from outside coming to teach different subjects. Again, all of them were white. I don't know why black people were not coming to teach us anything there. But it was there, whilst there, that I impressed some of those teachers within the classroom, and they thought that I had good potential. And Father Bill McKetty was actually the man in charge of the shelter. I think he was doing just about everything, fundraising, coordinating, planning the running of the shelter and all that. And so it was. I was brought to his attention that here was this young guy who's recently been enrolled here, and he's showing a lot of promise. And so it came that I got to meet Father Bill McKetty, and he took a very keen interest in me and was also impressed by my work rate within the classroom. And so after a while, he told me about this plan that he had for me. let me say that there were already children at that shelter who had been enrolled at formal schools in Soweto, various schools in Soweto. But Father Bill said to me that, however, you, William, will not be going to those township schools. I am going to make it a point that I enroll you at a private boarding school. Well, I made nothing of it at that time. I didn't think it was anything exceptional that he was taking such a personal interest in me and treating me differently. So Father Bill began to really go beyond in trying to make me happy. He started by buying me clothes. We always had people bringing in clothes to the shelter. And now, in his eyes, those clothes were no longer suitable for me. And so he would take me to Edgar's. It was the first time I wore clothing from Edgar's. Back home, they normally bought me clothes in Christmas from the Indian shops. And I enjoyed that very much, the experience of going to Edgar's and picking what I like. I felt very good, I remember that on first day. I wanted to wear them the same time in the store. And then he would take me out to restaurants. Again, something I was very, very excited about, because learning to eat with a fork and knife, and those meals were sumptuous, I must say. Back home, I enjoyed my pap and masonja, mopani worms masonja. So, but I didn't think anything of it. I was a kid enjoying all the attention, and it was good. It felt good that I had somebody of authority in the shelter who was also a priest and was taking good care of my spiritual and bodily needs. So much so that the other kids began to even be jealous of me. But as time went on, now this is 1985, you would wonder how I still remember all these things 27 years later. It's not something, these things are not, it's not something that you forget. They're like milestone events in one's life. So they are etched in my memory for good. Then, towards the end of 1985, Father Bill took me to a school in Roodepoort. The name of that school is St. Ansgar's. And there he introduced me to the school management, the school principal, Mr. Paul Jackson. God bless him, a very good man. And because they knew my background, that I was coming from the streets, so they made me feel very special also and welcomed that, and told me that come 86, William, you will be a student at the school. And this will be your boarding house. This is where you will be staying. And they introduced me to other teachers. And the first thing that struck me about that school was the fact that they were white teachers teaching black children. That was also surprising for me because it's something I was not used to. So yes, I was excited and I was happy. Immediately after that that trip to the school, Father Bill invited me to the church, Christ the King Cathedral in Doornfontein, to celebrate the good news. I was to have to sup with them, with him and the rest of the priesthood at that church. And indeed I went, and we had a very good supper. But he also told me that I was to sleep over, which was fine also. I didn't think anything about it. But when we were in the room, instead of offering me orange juice or apple cider or a Coke, he offered me a glass of whiskey. And I told him I was 13 going on 14, so plus I came from a family that was ravished by alcoholism, so I did not like alcohol. So, but he insisted. We are celebrating, remember, William? You'll be going to school too. And so it won't harm you. And so one glass and then led to another. And eventually I got drunk. And when I was drunk and it came time to sleep, Father Bill then started to retrace to me everything he has done for me over the months, the clothing, the money, the pocket money, the school. So all the good things he had done for me and was still going to do for me. But it seemed there was a condition. All I had to do was just give him a bit of pleasure. Nothing serious, nothing that will harm me. I just have to play with it and masturbating. I was shocked because, no, really I was shocked. I was not yet at an age where I was thinking of or have experienced anything or thinking anything to do with sex. But as he kept on talking, he was making a lot of sense. Yes, he has been doing a lot for me, and the future was looking very bright for me. And the whiskey also said, well, why not, William? There's no harm in it, as he says. And so the masturbations took place, and And then it went on to the kissing, which I didn't like at all. I didn't mind the masturbation, but the kissing was disgusting. Thinking of kissing another man, I was not even thinking of kissing a girl. And here I was kissing an elderly a white priest in his dormitory. But I let it go, I let it happen. And so the following day, in the morning, he made it known to me that this was something to be kept between the two of us. I was never to tell anyone about this. Otherwise, the alternative would be not only that I lose my place in the shelter, but all prospects of ever going to St. Ansgar's. He understood me very well because he knew that I had a hunger for getting education. I had already made it known to them that I'm from a family that has never produced a matriculant, and I would like to be the first one to matriculate and go beyond. And he had promised me that that would be possible. So I agreed to that secret. And also, the following day, I also got promoted to the position of an altar boy at Christ the King. That he would spend the day training me on how to become one, which he did. I was there. I know that it was a weekend because he gave morning mass on weekends, and then during the weekdays it will be day or afternoon. So I spent that weekend at Christ the King. And on both 2 nights, I was molested. And later I returned to the shelter. But I was not as excited as I used to be when I returned to the shelter, because normally after a trip out with Father Bill, I would like to brag about what he has done for me that day or the previous 2 days. So I was in a somber mood. I was feeling awkward, if that is for lack of a better term. But I let it go. I thought it was just that weekend. I've paid my price, and then I was looking forward to going to college, to school the following year. But it did not stop there. It happened again. He came, took me out of the shelter, out to lunch at this restaurant. It's in Yeoville, O'Reilly Street. And after the meal, no, actually it was not lunch, it was the supper, yes. And after the meal, we drove to
the Zoo League. And at the Zoo League, again, I had to perform to do him those the favors that he needs. And whilst we were just after I had finished masturbating him, there was a knock on my side of the window, and there were two white cops with torches shining into the car, and they asked me to open the window, and he was begging me not to say a word. As I was opening the window, he let it be known to me that, William, don't say nothing, please. And so they asked us what we were doing in the car. And he said, no, we were just chatting, talking to this young boy. I'm a priest and he has a problem with his family, so he came to me and he was telling me his story. And then the police said, they asked me if that was the case. And I said, yes. I said, well, we shouldn't be doing that out at Zoo Lake. It can be done at the church premises, so we must leave. And we left, and he thanked me. I was very grateful that I did not tell the police anything. 1986 came, and true to his word, I was enrolled at St. Ansgar's. I was the happiest child. I wanted even the fellow comrades with student activists with whom I came. I remember I said we had already gone our separate ways, but how I'd wanted for them to see that there was another angle to pursue, that they could pursue to life than thinking of going into exile. But I did not know by then where they were or what they were doing. But I was happy to be at school. Most of the time I was happy to be at school. But the weekends came, and now, remember, I'm also an altar boy at the church, so on weekends he comes and I have to go and do my duties. And he will come and fetch me on Fridays. And when I am there, I always spend nights with him in his dormitory. And the same things happen. I don't like repeating the details. I've already said so you understand when I say same thing, what I'm referring to. Not every weekend, but most weekends. When I was there, I was expected to pleasure him. So this thing affected me a lot. And it affected my mind in a way that I started to
act in a very inappropriate way whilst at school with both boys and girls, making sexually charged remarks, and inappropriate sexual acts like touching girls' breasts or pinching their behind. And then there was a girl whom I fancied at the school, and I wanted to date her. And I kept approaching her, and she was not interested in me in that way. She was not interested in me in that way, to be a boyfriend, but she was friendly to me. So other boys had girlfriends, and I wanted to be like them too. I mean, I'm also I'm an adolescent now, and I'm plus I've already been baptized into this thing of albeit in a very different manner. So now I know what sex is, and I know, as I always knew, it's natural to do it with the opposite sex. But I have a problem because I don't do it in the correct or appropriate way. So she kept resisting my advances, and I was getting very angry because I wanted for me to feel like I can also have a girlfriend whom I could kiss and hug and hold, apart from what I was experiencing with Father Bill. So I wrote her a very sexually explicit or sexually charged letter, telling her in that letter, describing the things I would love to do to her. And the things I wrote to say I would like to do to her were the things that Father Bill was doing to me. Where I would like to kiss her, where I would like to put my finger. It was very explicit. And that girl was shocked. And so she took the letter to the school management, the principal, and the principal called Father Bill. And the letter was read to him, and I was asked if I was the author of the letter. And I admitted that yes, I was. And they asked me why I would write such a letter. And I said, because those are the things I would like to do to her. And they were shocked. They were shocked further by the fact that not only do I own to it, but I'm saying to them that indeed those are the things I would like to do to her. And Father Bill I remember he's admonishing me, saying you should show remorse. And I was saying, remorse for what?
And so I was expelled as a result of that letter from that school. I was expelled, and Father Bill told me afterwards, although he was supposedly angry with me in the office, but outside he told me not to worry, that it was okay. I guess he understood already what was happening to me. And he said, I will find you a better school. You are not going to the shelter. But in any case, I was no longer going to the shelter, so you come and stay over at the church whilst I find you another school. And true to his word again, within a month he found me a school in Moy River in KwaZulu-Natal, Treverton College. Another surprise, because now this is a private school, one of the few prestigious private schools in the country. Then and now, I think. And I found that in a school of some 800 plus students, there were less than 10 black students. I was surprised because I never knew that there was such a school anywhere in the country. But there I was at that school. And so I became enrolled at that school. And now, I suppose because I've moved from St. Ansgar's to this prestigious school in KZN, this private school, that the repayment to him had to be on the same standards, better for him, because in a few months afterwards, we went on a holiday to this place called the Big Fisherman in Amanzimtoti, also in KZN. And there again, just the two of us, we are out, we are on holiday. And I was already I was already accustomed to drinking anyway, something I looked forward to actually at that time. Whenever I was with him, because I knew what was going to happen, I was the one who was saying, where's the drink? So that, because I knew when I was drunk, it eased the shame and the pain. But that night, Father Bill did more than just molest me. get myself together. Please excuse me. So that night, Father Bill went a step further. And after applying me with alcohol as usual, whilst I was in that state, drunk, he took the opportunity to penetrate me. And he raped me. And the following morning I woke up and immediately I knew. I did not have to wonder or think about it. Immediately when I felt the pain that I was feeling, immediately I knew what he had done. I went to the shower. It was not easy walking. But after about an hour or so in the shower, I felt a bit cleaner and I took a walk to the beach front, and I sat there by the beach by myself. And then when he woke up, that's where he found me, sitting by the beach. And then he called me out said, let's go and have breakfast, William. What's the matter? You don't look so happy. So, I'm not well. I have this pain in my behind. I don't know. Do you know anything about it? And then he was saying, you must have fallen off the bed because you drank too much last night. But I knew that there was no such. And so he gave me some painkillers. And I took the painkillers, felt a little better. But I was down. I was very sad. And that was the very first time in my life when I started to feel so much hate for a person. I hated him that day. But for a while I kept my cool and pretended that, okay, it's a fall, as he was saying. And then we were playing table tennis later on. And I was a good table tennis player. I normally won most, if not all, of my games. It's a sport that I loved, but he was beating me that day because I was not as agile as I normally am because of the pain. And so that also added to my anger that I was being beaten by this old man because he had just raped me the night before. And then I began to attack him out of the blue. I hit him with the table tennis bat. And then there was a wet towel that I had used earlier in the morning while I was at the beach. And I grabbed it and and I went at him with that towel. I thrashed him, and every time I saw his body going pink, I just wanted to beat him some more so that the whole body goes pink. And he was struggling to get hold of me because he was chasing him around, and then he's chasing me around trying to catch me. Now I'm throwing things at him. So by the time he managed to grab me, he was bruised and battered. And he was saying, "William, why? What has got into you? Are you crazy? Why are you doing this?" I said, "You know why I'm doing this. Because I know what you did to me last night." And then he started to cry. He held me tight, very tight, and he was shaking, and he was crying. And he was telling me how very sorry he was, that he didn't know what got over him. It must have been the drink. He must have also had more than the usual. And he begged for my forgiveness. At that time we were both crying. And I said, I forgive you. That I hope it will never happen again. And then I said to him, I can't stay with you here and continue enjoying the beach with you. I need to go home. I had been home since 1985. So since we were on holiday, I said, no, I don't want to be a part of this holiday. I just want to go home to my family. In my mind, I was telling myself that I was never coming back. I was going back home for good, because that was I was enough. I wanted no more. So much so that I was willing to sacrifice all the privileges that he was making possible for me. He tried to persuade me otherwise, but my mind was made up. And so he organized transport for me. I got on the Greyhound, and I came to Johannesburg, and from Johannesburg I went back home to Polokwane, where my family was very happy to see me after such a long time. And I wanted to tell them that I was not going back. I wanted to tell my brothers and my sisters about my good fortunes and my bad fortunes, so I could get their advice, and my mother. But when I got home, I realized that nothing had changed. There was nothing for me to stay with my family for. There was no way I was going to forfeit that opportunity, because I needed to finish what I started so I can uplift their standard. And so, when the time came for me to return back to school, I came back to Johannesburg. And I went back to school. The rest of the year went without much to tell you about. He laid low. When I came up to Johannesburg for holidays, I refused to go and stay at the church. I had established some friendships with my fellow classmates here at school, and so I asked them if they could ask their parents to host me for the duration of the holidays, which they did. So I would stay with this or that family. If anything but the church. Wherever I was staying, he would come, and because he's a priest, he would establish good relations with them. But he was coming to check on me, also to ensure that I keep to the pact that we had about me not telling anybody about what had been transpiring between me and him. But I plainly refused to go to the church or even to be an altar boy, because it was this altar boy thing that was getting me into trouble. It's always the pretext that I have to be an altar boy. And so I was off the hook for a while. And then came 88, the following year. And then again, I came up, and he wanted me to come and stay with him at Holy Trinity Church in Braamfontein. I don't know if the resident priest, what was happening to him or where he was, but maybe he was holding fort for him in his absence, or he had been assigned that parish by then. I can't remember at this stage. I did not make it my business to know about his business much. But he invited me to the Holy Trinity. And I went. And that weekend, was the second time that this man again raped me in his room. And it was a replay of much the same event at Amanzi Mtoti. Afterwards, there was a lot of crying and apologizing. Except this time, there was no violence on my part. I felt I had no power anymore. So I resigned myself to my fate. And so I took it lying down. As a reward, he gave me money to send to my family. And he taught me how to drive for the first time, how to drive a car around Braamfontein. And of course, the coaching continued. He never let me forget that. He never let me forget about the carrot that I was enjoying. And indeed, I never forgot. So I kept to my word. I didn't speak. Around the same time, there was another priest who must have known, I suspect, about the nature of the relationship between me and Father Bill. And under the guise of wanting to help me or to find out what was going on, he eventually also took advantage of me. But not within the church walls, but at Emmarentia Park, in his car. And he asked me to masturbate him. So I started to wonder, what is it about me that attracts these vultures to treat me like this? But nonetheless, as I said, I guess I'd already resigned myself to being used like that. So I also let him have his way. And then he did it again. For the second time, same place, but different time. So in 1989, I decided, no, I'm ahead of myself. Because I did not last the rest of the following year at Treverton. I became... Look, there was a lot of racism at that school. But I also had a few good white friends. And those few good white friends, their friendship outweighed the hatred that was surrounding me. So I survived on their friendship. It was good enough for me. But I also started to become very aggressive and very angry. Whereas before I would take the racism lying down, pretended that it did not happen. I began to fight back, and in one of those fight backs, things took a rather unexpected twist, in that I ended up stabbing a fellow white student who had been a source of much strife and humiliation to me. So during one of his during one of his usual attacks on me, I snapped and I grabbed the nearest thing I could see, which happened to be a pen. One of those expensive gold cross pens which I got from Father Bill as a gift. And I stabbed him multiple times in the front and in the back as he was running. And as a result, the police were called to the school. But they decided not to prefer any criminal charges against me. I suppose it wouldn't have looked good for the image of the school. Also, it might have given this other little black kids in the township some ideas that a white person could be stabbed and can get away with it. I mean, I can be stabbed by a black guy. So they did not prefer any criminal charges against me, but I was expelled from that school. I was expelled from that school, and I got a lot of flack from my benefactor, Father Bill Mekete, for that. And but as always, he found me another school. This time I ended up at Woodmead College in Bryanston. And then, of course, it was now normal that after I've sinned, I must repent. And the way to repent was to pay him in kind, which I did. But in 1989, I was older now. I was thinking better. It's more matured, and I found myself finding the courage to stand up for myself, to bring to bring this abuse to a total end. And so I decided to approach the only black priest who was at Christ the King Cathedral at that time, to tell him the suffering that I was enduring. And I remember when I said to him that there was something I wanted to tell him about Father Bill and me. He was taken aback, and he said, "My child, I think I know what you're going to tell me. But please, I'll rather not be involved." So rather you approach the superior and tell him yourself. I was very disappointed. Not only disappointed, but I was very hurt, because I'd counted on his on his understanding and sympathy, him being a black priest and me being a black child, that maybe we would gel and bond and he would understand. But he said he was not in a position to can help me. I did not have any relationship with the other priests there, so the only other priest I could go to was that priest who over the 2 year, who had also taken advantage of me on 2 occasions previously. So I approached him and I said, you know what Father Bill has been doing to me, and you know what you did to me. But in comparison to what you have done to me, mind you, this other father had on many occasions, always after he molested me, had begged me. Every time he saw me, he would beg me for forgiveness, and he would give me money. And he would be friendly to me, he would give me money and beg for forgiveness. Over the years, all the time he saw me, he was very friendly and he wanted to tell me how sorry he was that he did that, but that he's not like Father Bill. To an extent where I began to believe that, yes, you know, he was better than Father Bill. And so I approached him and I said, I want you to help me to bring this information to the bishop or the superior of the church, to tell him about what Father Bill has been doing to me since 1985. And I want it to come to a stop now. It must come to an end. And you are going to help me, because if you don't help me, I'm not only going to tell about Father Bill, but I'm also going to tell about you. So if you help me, Father, I promise, and I made a promise, and I meant it at that time, that I won't tell. I will never tell. I promise. I promised him. That's why even today you don't hear me say his name. I made a promise to him. And maybe it's hard for somebody who's outside my shoes to understand why I would want to keep that promise that I made to him. But I'm a man of my word, so I intend to honor my promise to him, because he kept my promise to me to report Father Bill to the authorities. And in so doing, finally, he won me the reprieve. And he set me free. Talk about making a deal with the devil. In this instance, it's in the literal sense. So he kept his word, and he set me free. And within a 6-month period, Father Bill was relocated to, they tell me, Bournemouth in England. but they are in a better position to can tell you where they relocated him to in 1990. I am not. And for breaking that silence to the church in 1990, as had always been asserted by Father Bill, that once he's gone, if I speak and he's gone, then everything comes to an end, and I'm back on the streets. And true to his prediction, when he left, I was back on the streets. The church wanted nothing to do with me. The shelter management wanted nothing to do with me. In fact, before he left, he told me, he reminded me in no uncertain terms that, William, I'm going to England. You will never see me again. And now you're on your own. So my reward for speaking out was that I was out on the streets. The shelter management sat me down and said, my school fees at Woodmead were too expensive. It did not matter that I was performing well academically, but my school fees at Woodmead were too expensive. So it took them that long to realize that I was actually a liability, a financial liability to the shelter, and by extension to the church, because I believe that the church was also contributing towards my education. And so the church also refused when I approached them to contribute any cent further to my education. And when I explained my dilemma to the principal of Woodmead, it's a private school, whoever is the investor in that school wants their profits, so it's not a charity organization. There was nothing they could do to me, so I was out of the school. Out of the school, out of the shelter. And that was my reward. But at that time, although I was very hurt, but I felt it was a price worth taking. If they don't want anything to do with me because I didn't want anything to do with their priest and what he was doing to me, well, so be it, that's fine. And so from then on, my life was reversing back to square one. But I didn't stop going to the church. I went whenever I could between 1990 and 2001. And always when I would go, this time I'm older. I'm on the streets again, but streetwise. I'd been on the streets before, So, although I'm on the streets, I don't sleep on the streets. I find a way to make money so that I can pay my rent. And I started drinking a lot. And for the first time in my life, I started experimenting with drugs. And I become hooked. So much so that I become worse than the veterans, drug users, because now I want to be on high and drunk every day. But even during that time, I would go to the church and say, but what about me? Really? Are you going to do this to me? Because I told about what Father Bello was doing. Nobody wanted to hear me. The only priest who would give me an audience whenever I went to the church and tell me, William, look, they've sent Father Bill away. He's in England. He can't hurt you anymore. They don't want. You have to understand. The church, they don't want anything to do with you. And then he will give me money. Then I'll be happy because I'll go and buy my drugs and buy my alcohol. And that is that priest with whom I made the deal that I won't name. And things got so bad that I eventually ended up in trouble with the law. I was arrested for car theft. I wasn't even a perfect driver at that time. Not much of a good driver, but I managed to steal a car or take a car without the owner's permission. I got arrested, and when I was arrested, I pled guilty on my first appearance in court, despite the fact that the complainant, for various reasons, was not in the court, and I know for sure would have never come to the court. But I saw that my life was going out of control, that I needed help. The drugs were taking their toll on me, and I feared that I would end up dead. So when the magistrate sentenced me to 6 lashes, I was very disappointed in him because I was looking for time inside. And so I made it known to him that if you're going to send me out there after 6 lashes, you're going to see me before you within 2 to 3 weeks. And maybe for a crime worse than this one. And they couldn't understand. I remember even the prosecutor, everybody were confused and saying, what's wrong with this drug here? But I said I wanted my time. But there was a reason why I wanted my time, because I wanted time away from the alcohol and the drugs to gather myself together and to reflect on what was happening in my life. And so I spent 8 months in prison for that. And when I came out of prison, 92, Johannesburg was very violent, too much political violence, so I went back home. And after the elections in 94, I came to the church again And again, nobody in the church wanted to believe me. They never believed my story. It's my truth, but to them it's a story and allegations. They never believed. They never showed me any. All I wanted was to be understood, to be heard, and to be believed. So much. That's all I wanted. For them to believe me, that was very important for me. At that time, that was all that was going through my mind all the time. It was bothering me. Why don't these people believe me? And they did not realize that. They did not realize how much damage they were doing to my soul. And to my faith. Every time they refuse to hear me out, to show me just a little understanding, some compassion. But I learned to live with it. They know, they understood. They understood my background, where I came from, and that I had no support structure. And they capitalized on that. And so the church never gave me a time of day. And so around 96, 97, I found I couldn't continue staying in Polokwane. I was too accustomed to the city life. So I returned to Johannesburg and went back to my old ways. But this time, I was not just using Mandrex and Dachar and drinking alcohol. I became an entrepreneur now. I was selling as well. So I was making some money. So I was using and selling. I was staying in Fortsburg at some Indian guys, an abandoned church building. And that was our headquarters. We were selling and smoking, selling and smoking. But this shadow of Father Bill was always in my mind. So in 2001, again, I went to the church. This time I must have made enough noise to get an audience from them. Because finally they decided to give me a time of day. And I told them, look, I need help here. My mind is messed up. And so first of all, I need counseling. And number two, I need to do something constructive with my life. There's a course at Damelin College that I would like to enroll for. Call center management. I've seen the scope, and I think it will be a walk in the park for me. If you could just pay for that at least, and also for my counseling at least. And they said I would need a lawyer to accompany me so we can talk about this. And I told them that I don't have the resources. I mean, look at me. I don't have the resources for that. And they said, we can organize, we can see what we can do so that you have at least a lawyer can witness that we would like to help you, okay? And they said, but in the meantime, can you go home to your family? And I said, yes, sir. They said, no, go home to your family. Stay away from you. You see, you have too much access to these drugs here in Gauteng, and they are destroying your life. So they were a little sympathetic in that they could see what the drugs were doing to my body and to my mind, and they said I should go back home and they would get back to me. And they did, and they recommended a lawyer that I should go to there. And I went to that lawyer, and together with the lawyer, we came up to Johannesburg, and they signed a check of 25,000 rand to cover my costs and for counseling, and promised to investigate my allegations, because to them they were still allegations, but to me it's my truth, as real as I am sitting here. It's my truth. It will never change. That's why So anyway, I enrolled at Tamili. I never finished the course, as you can well imagine. The drugs, it's not easy to leave drugs once you are hooked. So even then they did not. Plus, their good lawyer also took 10,000 rand from the 25. So I did not end up with the 25. I ended up with the 15,000 because he said that they had not paid him what was due to him. When I phoned them, they said, no, we paid him. He's lying. And then go to the Northern Transvaal Law Society. I went, and then he said, okay, William, I'll give you the money. What told me stories. So in that case, I only got the 15,000 from that 10,000, and eventually that lawyer was debarred from the laws by the Law Society for this transgression and others. So he wasn't an honest lawyer. He wasn't an honest lawyer. So I waited for the investigation to take place, for somebody to come and investigate, but they never came. And in 2008, I read a lot. Now it was possible for me to can now lay criminal charges against Father Bill, despite the fact that what happened to me was so many years ago. And so again, there I did open a criminal case, but I don't know how far it is going. It was opened in February this year, and so my my legal representatives, Ian Levitt, attorneys, should be able to elaborate further as to how far the case is and what they are doing. But the response from the church to the story, even to this day, is that there are two responses. There's a response that says they will investigate, and there is a response that says they have conducted an investigation. So, whilst there is an investigation that has been conducted, there's a one that is also being conducted. But I want to focus a bit before I finish on the one that has been investigated, because I would like to hear. I would like to know who conducted the investigation, when the investigation was conducted, and if they will be so kind as to make available to me the findings of that investigation. And for this other team that is still conducting an investigation, I'm saying to them, I hope I don't have to wait another 17 years before I make my statement available to them as they pursue their investigations. And also that they will be kind enough, once they have completed their investigations, to give South Africa, myself and South Africa, the results of those investigations. I've taken this abuse from Father Bill, this abuse from the church, and this continued victimization from the church for far too long. I have children now. I'm a married man. I have 7 children. I am not going to allow that any of my child would have to go through what I went through, ever. Not mine, not anybody's child. If it happens that upon his relocation, Father Bill had continued to abuse other children wherever he was stationed, I'm going to feel very bad about it, because I've kept silent for so long. But I'm not going to allow it to happen to any other child going forward. I think that is all I have to say.
William, one of the most important things of any survivor is to hear the following words. We believe you. We believe you. And you have been heard. My name is Reese Mann. I'm from South African Male Survivors of Sexual Abuse. William, your disclosure today was heroic. The detail that you've had it. What concerns us is the mini-me. How many Williams are there from the hands of Father Bill alone? How did Father Bill land up in South Africa? What did he do in Europe to be landed up like a lot of priests in developing countries? What happened to the other boys in the shelter? What happened to William when he was away from the church? William's experience at the hands of a Catholic priest, robbed him of his adolescence, robbed him of his youth. And in his own words, he was baptized into sex by the very person who had been ordained to protect children. The church used its privilege, it used its power, and it used its influence to groom a young child. In another case that we're dealing with, we have seen a common thread that European priests came to South Africa, and I can only talk about South Africa, and used their position to groom South African citizens, and specifically people of color, to give them white privilege. They used this as a part of their grooming process, to give people of color in South Africa white privilege, to give them opportunities that they would never have got. When I think of apartheid, and I think how sick of apartheid is, and then I think of a Catholic priest arriving in South Africa and using apartheid, and using the deplorable things that happen in our country, to use it to abuse young boys. We waited too long in South Africa for this type of abuse to come forward. William's bravery is going to bring a lot of closure or a lot of openings to other males who've been sexually abused. Because there's hundreds of males out there who've been sexually abused, and they probably have spent their whole life, or their life has been destroyed, thinking they are the only boys who are probably sexually abused. They're carrying the shame, they're carrying the blame, they're carrying the guilt. I just want to share a little bit with you from the conference that I attended in New Zealand, and I presented in New Zealand, and from one of the presenters. The Australian government had a royal commission. The government themselves paid and tasked the Royal Commission to look at sexual abuse in Australia. If need be, they called in consultants and they called in academics to do research. Just want to share with you some of the facts that they got. And the final report was only finalized in December 2017. They identified 4,000 institutions in Australia where sexual abuse had taken place. 2,000 survivors reported sexual abuse in the Catholic institutions, 500 in Anglican, and 250 in the Salvation Army. The Commission estimated that there were probably 40,000 survivors. Only very few came forward. 5% of the survivors were under the age of 5, 28% between 5 and 9 years old, and 46% between 10 and 14 years old. They came upon 444 complaints that were disclosed to various institutions. 78% of the victims were male, and the average age was 11.6 years. And specifically today, because we dealt with a Catholic priest, 7% of all Catholic priests were alleged to be perpetrators. If one just thinks that the Roman Catholic Church has over 400,000 priests, 7% of that, just over 29,000 predators. And Luke will probably say these figures are totally underestimated, but if there were 50 victims of these predators, and just remember they had the institutional and they had the power. In their lifetime, if they had abused 50 victims, it means there's 1.5 million young boys out there who've been abused at the hands of these predators. Abuse happens in secret. It's quite interesting that confessional also happens in secret. the trauma and effects of sexual abuse of people, of young boys, is a lifetime healing process that they have to go through. William's hope is that he can reach out to the hundreds and thousands of other male victims who were sexually abused, that they too can come forward and get help and get assistance. We've been here a long time, so this is William's press conference, and I'd like to have the closing remarks and summary of this abuse that has happened within the institution of the church. I'd like to ask Luke Lamprecht, who's the Director of South African Male Survivors of Sexual Abuse, and he's also the spokesman for Women and Men Against Child Abuse.
Right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will be brief because William has said most of what I feel needs to be said. I think what people underestimate is the effect religious abuse has on young people. You take the fact that the Catholic Church has an almost intractable problem, and the intractable problem is one called papal infallibility. So for the Catholics, and mainly you'll know what we're talking about, it's the Pope can't be wrong. So if the Pope changes his mind, his direct line from God has become a problem. So for example, when challenging the sanctity of the confessional, we have a real problem, because out of all the recommendations made by the Royal Commission in Australia, they're meant to come into effect now in October. There was a bit of leeway for them to come into effect. And the Australian Church, obviously led by the Vatican, has simply said, we will not obey your laws. And there are Jesuit priests quoted as saying, we will simply ignore the laws that you write, and you can't prove anything that happened in the confessional. And the difficulty is that what would they be giving up in terms of priests confessing to other priests if they just made a very simple... We are not attacking the whole religion. It is simply saying that there are structures in place that not only have given men access to abusing young boys, but have actually facilitated it in many ways by not reporting it and simply moving men around. In the response by the Jesuits to William's case, they write... The first response in January was, we are filled with feelings of regret. They say things like, I know that you have asked to receive an apology directly from Father McCurtain, but he's too ill. It's clear that Father McCurtain violated the trust that was placed in him. This sounds very much like a confession to me. It sounds like they are acknowledging they knew. Yet, when they write the response to today's press conference, they are now aware that this case was being investigated. They allege that it was only reported in 2001, the second or third time that William reported it, and they say they moved Father McCurtain in 1990, which coincides completely, and William hasn't even seen this release today, which coincides completely with him being moved. And we speculate that what has happened is that 2001 is the year he probably retired, because they claim they took him away from any active service. Never held him accountable. Took him away from active service. So somewhere they are saying that they knew this happened. Somewhere they are acknowledging it without saying, yes, we are guilty of this. And this shrouding of everything in this big secret is tied up in a very complex psychological process when people are abused by leaders of the church. And it's one we call the transcendental reference. So you've got papal infallibility. So the Pope can't be wrong, so how do we change the rule around the confessional? Because how do you say God changed his mind or the Pope got it wrong? It's a complicated problem. The other thing that we've got is the Catholic priests are celibate. Well, allegedly celibate. The Catholic priests are said to be celibate. And the problem is you give up your sexuality at 18 for the rest of your life. It doesn't sound normal to me. I mean, I'm not saying some Catholic priests can't be celibate, but it just doesn't sound normal to me. And what does that mean? Well, it means simply that the flesh corrupts. So it means everything around them is a temptation. So if you think of what that translates into, first of all, innocent until proven guilty means that the person who is telling the story like William is making allegations, is lying, until we can prove the other person guilty. So the shame sits with the victim, not with the priest. And the second thing around it, which makes it much more complicated, is the fact that the victim is then seen as the tempter of a man of God, and almost the instrument of the devil who has taken this man away from his path of righteousness in God's eyes. So the level of spiritual kind of, I don't even have a word for it, the level of spiritual torment, I mean, is your own living hell, because you are then seen as the person who has tempted this man of God, and you are the one who should have done something about it. And the level of rage that this evokes in me, I can't even explain, because there's this thing that some institution can be above the best interest of children. There's not, I don't even believe there's, and I was also for my sins a student of religion, but the difficulty that we face, and I mean it's a real difficulty, I don't even believe that there is a scriptural injunction for the confessional. You have a direct line to God yourself. You don't need the confessional. And the difficulty with that is that these gatekeepers to God are also the gatekeepers to the law. They're the same people who are closing gates on all sides, which is facilitating, allowing, and maintaining the rampant sexual abuse of young boys by the clergy. So, my concluding comments in very simple terms is that it is, so we all, I'm sure, have heard the "suffer not the little children to come unto us" quote out of the Bible. And the Bible and Jesus says at that time, that's what we need to be to come to the kingdom of God, not some big institution with lots of rules. And what he said most importantly was, if any of you come and you harm those little ones who come unto me, rather put a millstone around your neck and drown yourself in the sea. That doesn't sound like Jesus would approve of the way this is currently happening. And I use the religious argument quite intentionally, because the religious argument has been used to maintain the secrecy and the silence. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody for being here today and listening to William, and to you, William, for telling us your story, telling us your truth in every detail. And I think from now the church will have to acknowledge the suffering that's been caused to you for so many years. Thank you.
And the response by the Jesuits is on the table if any of you would like to see it. Yeah, go for it.
Graham Hoskin from Times Select and Sunday Times. In terms of the criminal case that has been opened, when was we can get a case number, please?
Sure.
What case has been opened? And also, have the British authorities been contacted, given that there's an extradition treaty with the UK government? Has the case was this case been raised with the British authorities?
The case was opened in February of 2008, and I will give you the case number in a moment. We can just take the next.
Case was opened.
It opened in Hillborough Police Station, and there's been no follow-up whatsoever.
So
Correct, William? There's been no follow-up by the investigating officer whatsoever.
Not with me, no, but I think, as I said, the attorneys handling my case, Ian Levitt's attorneys, should be able to elaborate further as to how the case is going.
The case is 155/2/2018, and at the Hillborough Police Station.
That was February this year.
February of 2018.
And I just want to point out that how William initially came to Rees was he was so desperate he was going to stage a hunger strike outside the Holy Trinity Church in Braamfontein, which when I was at varsity, in and around the same time, was the centre of the liberation theology movement of Johannesburg. I mean, so it was an incredibly powerful institution. And just in answer to you, have the British authorities been notified? That gap between 1990 and 2001 is a complete unknown. We believe he retired in 2001. He was moved in 1990, as William said. was in Bournemouth for about 11 years, which we don't believe has been investigated. Well, no one has told us it has been. And in response, the Jesuits, in fact, William asked to speak directly to the father, and they said he is too frail, so that will not happen. And when he made the case and asked for the extradition, which we are still calling for, incidentally, it's the principle of the matter that no matter where you get posted, we will bring you back. That's the principle. And we still want the extradition to be applied for, even if he is too frail to come back. Okay, because the precedent that's been set is if you're too frail, you can be protected in England. We won't allow that. So we are still calling for the extradition to be applied for. He's apparently too frail in a nursing home to respond personally to anything. So that's what we've got going.
And have you actually communicated with like the British police or the British government about this specific case?
As I said, only the attorney should be able to.
And those attorneys are?
Ian Levitt.
Ian Levitt.
We have, I've personally got hold of a lot of the advocacy groups this last 5 days in the United Kingdom and asked them also to start working on this case, because we honestly believe there was a reason that he came to South Africa, and we know of the reason he went back to Bournemouth and what happened in those periods that he was prior to South Africa and what happened to that thing. He's a career paedophile. He's a career. He's not going to just change countries and change behavior.
Sorry, I just want to mention, because I think you've got both the documents, Lou.
Yes, I do.
Have you got the most recent one from
I
last
do.
night?
Yeah.
So I think in the first document, they did not clarify that he had no access to anyone else during the years. They didn't mention that. The latest one from us that we got last night says that they say that he had no access to anyone from the time he went back. But they're very vague about what is anyone was it within the church, was it outside the church? But in the first document that we will share, the second document, there's just a few differences that I will try and clarify quickly for you.
Just on the first document is January 2018, which they're investigating. How do you investigate anything like this without contacting William directly for his side of the story? So we're sitting now in October for 10 months.
Yeah, maybe it will take them another 17 months.
But they've made lots of concessions. I mean, that first letter, for me, is as good as them having said that he did it. There's a question there, and then at the back.
Yes.
No, first you joined up first. Sorry.
Cool. Greg Nicholson from the Daily Maverick. Just on the criminal charges, do you just want the priests charged, or are you also hoping that certain leaders of the Catholic Church at the time who might have allowed this to happen, do you want also them to be criminally charged? And you mentioned the inquiry earlier in Australia. Do you hope for, I think it was in Victoria or the whole of Australia, do you hope that there is a similar inquiry set up in South Africa? And finally, since this matter was reported on earlier this year, I think it was in the Star, have any other victims come forward to say that they either suffered similar abuses at Catholic churches across the country, or from this particular priest, or that particular church?
What justice do you want? Do you want the priest to be, or do you want the church to be also?
It's for me, it's difficult to say because I don't understand what the law says. So once again, I would say the people best positioned to answer that question would be my attorneys. But my understanding is that his superiors here in South Africa were complicit in many ways because of the nature of what was happening. There's no way that they could not have known And then also, I am told again by Martin that by law, they should have actually reported him to SARS then. So my attorney should be able to clarify that who is to be charged and who is not.
To answer your question about the Australian Royal Commission, yes, we would. New Zealand have just started their Royal Commission of Inquiry as well. And I think it would be very important for our state and the National Prosecuting Authority to actually demand that the church opens all its records, because it is a criminal offence within South Africa not to divulge and not to report any sexual violation of a child. And we know from other commissions of inquiries, and specifically, and Luke's been following the international thing that's been happening around the world, when the files are opened, it's an avalanche of cases of forward. So we would like to have a commission, and more importantly, we'd like to have the church force to open up all its records of any thing. And I think they are liable for every single one of those cases that they didn't report, because they have tacitly allowed and approved of the continual sexual abuse within the institution.
In answer to your question about other victims, so we have a range of victims from within religious institutions currently that we are dealing with, not just the Catholic Church, but other religious institutions as well. So there is some sort of groundswell of people coming forward. But as I said, disclosing abuse by priests within religious institutions is a particularly vexed issue.
I just want to mention, who has not got the response from the Jesuits?
Everybody.
Okay, so there's two copies. We're going to try and make sure that you've got both, because definitely in the second one, which we received yesterday evening, they acknowledge. Does anybody want me to read this, or would you just look at your own copies? I just want to mention there was a difference, because they did not, in the original response, mention anything about him not immediately having contact with children. But in last night's one, this is their response basically. The British province of the Society of Jesus is aware of the case involving Father William McCurtain. When the case was reported in 2001, Father McCurtain had already returned to the UK. He had returned to the UK in 1990. Father McCurtain was informed of the allegations by the British Provincial and withdrawn from all active ministry. There isn't a date on that. He has never ministered again. We have taken steps to ensure there is no safeguarding risk to children. An investigation was carried out by the British province of the Society of Jesus, because Father McCurtain is a member of that province and it has jurisdiction over him. A local lawyer met with the complainant and his lawyers at the time in Johannesburg. The diocesan authorities were verbally notified of the case, and it was agreed that those responsible for him must deal with the case. So they put it all back into the current lawyers in Johannesburg.
And I think if William can just answer, because he lived this experience himself. William, are there other survivors out there, and do you believe there are other survivors out there, victims?
I believe there are, because the reason being that in my absence, specifically when I was at boarding school in KwaZulu-Natal, Father Bill still had this daily access to these kids at the shelter, and so I don't think that he would remain sexually inactive during my absence. So I suspect that yes, there were other children at Streetwise Children's Home and at Process, because these were two shelters that were within the same vicinity to which he had access to many boys.
So it's possible.
There was one at the back.
Yes, Erin Bates from the NCA. I have four, so I don't know if anyone wants to take these down. First off, William, just in recognition of your courage and your candor today, I think particularly when you spoke about the difficulties you faced in high school and coming to terms with your own sexual identity after the abuse you endured, and speaking in front of a group of strangers, so I just wanted to say that is a human being. If you could get the spelling of both your full name, please, and the name of the man who sexually bruised you, abused you, and raped you, please. Then I just wanted to say that I noticed a theme running through your speech. There was very palpable and understandable anger, particularly at this white man and the kind of abuse and exploitation that he executed, but also that you kept returning to the church. And I wonder why you did that. What was in you from maybe even before you came to Joburg that made you kept going back time and again after your drug abuse, after everything? Because some people would have just shut the door so angrily on the church, and I don't understand. I wanted to know what happened with the second priest and whether he was ever sanctioned for his sexual grooming and child sexual abuse, and if you know what happened to him, even though he also helped you with complicated things. And lastly, on those other survivors you believe exist, who were vulnerable children in shelters in Johannesburg, if they watch ENCA and they see your testimony, how do they get in touch to prosecute the sexual abuser and child rapist?
I'll answer. Is somebody writing the questions down for me? Let me start with number 2. The reason why I kept going back to the church, it's because it angered me that they were not believing me. So I wanted so much to be believed, for them to acknowledge that I had been abused. At that time, that's what I was feeling. I just wanted that acknowledgement and for them to believe me, because they made me feel like I was lying and that there is no way that Father Bill could. So I wanted so much to convince them that I am telling the truth. That's why I kept going back over the years.
Second question is regarding the second priest who you made.
Regarding the second priest, whom I have not named, he was eventually murdered by a young black man who's doing time for the murder, and who, when he was initially arrested, made a claim to the police that the priest was abusing him, hence he killed him. But he later changed his defense. I think now the cultural dynamics starts to come in, and it's very humiliating for a man to say that he was used as a sexual object by another. And so he changed his defense, and so the priest was killed.
And then just the spelling and any other things.
The spelling of my surname, because you won't have a problem with William, I'm sure.
Well, sometimes me.
It's SEGODISHO, and for the priest, his surname is McCurtain. It's MAC, and then capital letter C, curtain, as in curtains that we have in our homes.
Last question is
Yeah, so it's just
And the last question-
CURTAI.
Yes, and as to who they should get
hold of, like myself, I was struggling. I struggled a lot to find a support group. Ever since my story was came into the open, I saw the man who first wrote my story here, Shane. No, it's not him. It's not. Oh, it looks like him. Yeah. Yes. So I got calls, and so I'm happy. Although I got calls, but people are not ready. I'm hoping that that people will come forward, and they can also contact some source as I did, because I found a lot of support from the organization. Reese will give you his details, but for me, I don't mind to give my details also. They can call me. Maybe as victims, they'll be more willing to call me directly, because I've come out and I've broken the silence. My number is 0799 731 3001, and I will encourage them to call me or to call some source.
There was another one at the back next to Aaron.
Come again, sis?
Yeah.
079 937 0799 377 905. 0799 377 905.
We got a question in front of you.
Yes, question for William. So you mentioned that you went back to the church because you wanted to be believed by someone, but you haven't said anything about where your faith is now. Do you want to just tell us where your faith is now? Sorry, I'm Lucipo
Yes.
from Radio Veritas.
Oh, okay, Lucipo, I have not set foot in a church I had not set foot in a church for a long time. And my faith, it's shaky. I want to be honest with you. But of late, I have been trying to re-establish my faith in God, and been going to a non-Catholic church in my village where I come from, in Polokwane. I'm finding it also very uncomfortable still to be inside a church.
William Krasinski again from Sunday Times. If you said one message from Father McCurdy, what would that be? Unity and love.
You know, I've never allowed myself even to think about that. Frankly speaking, I have so much hate for the man right now. Even the apology that I demand from him, I don't think it will be something that will take place in the same room. And that hate is taking its toll on me. I don't know really what I would say to you. I don't know.
Any other questions?
Sorry, I'm not a journalist, but I'm quite curious. You mentioned your family when you married, you've got kids. How has your coming out affected your family, and how they speak to you and how you guys correlate with them?
Okay, thank you. No, it's fine. It was obviously a shock to them. With my I had very serious difficulties in my current marriage. My wife should have left me. On many occasions, she had threatened to leave me because she couldn't understand what I was going through. So, why the sudden swings in behavior and the anger and this tendency to want to be on my own, which and this overbearing control on the kids. I don't want my kids. I'm very overprotective of my kids, so I walk them from school habitually, and I fetch them from school every day, and I make sure that the gate is locked. I buy them the toys. I don't want them out on the streets unless they are with their mother or myself. And I realized I was not allowing them to be children. And so I decided to confront my wife and tell her about this. And in doing so, she then also encouraged me. She is the reason I have the strength and the courage to come before so many strangers and tell my story, because she has been very supportive ever since I told her. But I also went for joint counseling with her before breaking the silence. And with regard to my first wife, with whom I have 2 kids who are already over 21, I also had a sit down with them, and I told them about it and what I was going to do. I did not want for them to read it or hear it on radio and stuff. And good enough, I found that they are as shocked as they are supportive of their father, which has empowered me a lot for that support. So on both sides, I found good support from them.
Okay, on the back.
I'm not a journalist, but I just wanted to refer to an article that appeared in the Business Day today, which is that the church continues to justify or attempt to justify itself. And it refers to Pope Francis, who since 2013 has continually stated that the devil, Satan, is real. And this reality is the justification for the church's not having done anything itself. Satan is now an outsider. And he asks for the church and the faithful to pray for against Satan, who he refers to as the great accuser. So the church is continuing to try and justify and obfuscate. I just wanted to make that.
He's actually using Hansi's excuse.
The devil made me
The
do
devil
it.
made me do it.
And I'm glad you raised that because, like I said in my little summary, it's a theologically very complicated thing because the victims are seen as then the tools of the devil who have actually been used by the devil to corrupt the clergy. I mean, it's remarkable how you can make a theological statement like that. And I've said over the years that the prosecutors I've worked with have converted more men than religious institutions I've ever been in, because when these men get caught, praying to God is their first line of recourse. Everyone is suddenly part of the church. Okay? The thing though that does, and I say this in a very tongue-in-cheek but a very serious way, is that if you are claiming in this day and age almost possession or leading by the devil that makes people do things, you are completely removing any responsibility from the person who committed the offense. The treatment of that person is not a psychological treatment for a deeply pathological sexuality, but it is a case of praying that God can save. And remember, God grants things only by grace and mercy. You cannot earn them. So the difficulty is I want Satan's address, and I'm going to, not serious, I'm going to go serve a subpoena because he's complicit in so many of the crimes I investigate that I want to go and arrest him. As an accomplice. It does not excuse the address, but I actually want the address or to serve a subpoena to appear before us to account, because you know who Lucifer originally was? He was the prosecutor in God's court. He was actually the person who accused men before God. That's the original Lucifer. And I want that job. Any other last thoughts? Okay, so my concluding take-home message, much like what one thing we want to take away. We are not saying that the Catholic Church and Catholics are bad people and priests are all pedophiles. What we are saying very clearly is we do not believe that certain church institutional laws will stand up to our constitution. I think as a country, we need to take the lead in the world and be one ahead of the Australians who have refused now, regardless of the law, to say we'll do anything except the confessional. And I want the priests to know that if they want to confess, throw yourself on the mercy of the court, not ask for God's forgiveness. And we want to test this confessional against our constitution, and we want our constitution to clearly say, not in a country with a human rights record like ours will we allow this to continue.
I would like to honor your bravery.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, just this is a hard question. I can't have from Radio Red. When the church in South Africa approached about this, and were they invited to this press conference, for example?
So they were invited to the press conference. It was actually very difficult for us to get hold of the ethics committee. So if anybody actually, any human being, normal person wants to actually get hold of them and lay or complain to them about something, it was very difficult. We did eventually get hold of them. I'm quite happy. My colleagues actually just gone to print some extra of the responses from the Jesuits, so I will also be able to tell you who we copied and who we spoke to. We did speak, Luke, you and I, to Anna Cox this morning, who had got my request and said that it was too short notice. I did say that every other journalist we had contacted didn't mind the notice period they got and had attended. So I'm not going to put you about that. If you wanted to be here, you should be here today. So we have, and we'll just give you the list of who we contacted from the church.
And she also did say she'd make her, you all know her, I assume, because she's one of your peers or colleagues or whatever. So she has made herself available to talk on behalf of the church. They caucusing or getting messages or whatever they're doing at the moment. We were on the phone with them this morning just before the press conference.
So is that
Anna Cox. Your colleague next to you
specifically the Jesuits, have they been?
They've replied.
So you must remember the Jesuits have been asked, have been approached multiple times since the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
So there's been multiple attempts by William to engage the church directly, and the direct responses that have got was only when the legal people started filing legal papers that we started getting actual written responses back.
Yeah.
And the first one, if you read the first one, it's a deeply interesting, and this is going to answer to your question earlier, why just the focus on the one? Because it's one of the few replies I've ever seen that completely acknowledges the victim and the harm caused.
Yeah.
Completely acknowledges it. Which is curious because nothing happened after that.
To answer your question, internationally we're having a problem. that the church says it's got these committees and they've got this open door policy. But internationally, there's no list of numbers. If the Catholic Church really wants to be open, they must say, here is the number, here is the email, here is the address. This is who you can contact. I mean, we've got a similar case in Namibia. We cannot find the right person, the appropriate person, or the cardinal or the bishop who needs to be reported to with a case in Namibia.
And I had a case on the board in Musina in the early 2000s, very similar. Refugees coming across the border with a particular priest in that area. And I actually appeared before that committee that had the hearings on the priest. Nothing came of it either. So there's no transparency as to how that process actually occurs and what happens. And if you say you've done an investigation and write in letter of acknowledgement, how come have you not spoken to the victim? So I find that deeply curious. So what these processes are as mysterious as what happens in the confessional.
That response is from the Jesuits in the UK.
Yes.
Yes.
The Jesuits in South Africa.
They referred it up.
Yeah.
So what they did is they said because he falls under their, this is the other thing, the governance issue. Who is actually in charge of who becomes quite a complicated story. So they said it must be referred to them, they'll deal with it there, and our lawyers must carry on dealing with it here. They know the police investigation is happening, they've been told, he'll never be, the response by the lawyer was that he'll never be extradited, because he's too old. What was the response
Yes,
by
so
the
the
lawyer?
response was
That
that
he'll
he
never
was
be
in frail
extradited
care
because he's
and
frail
that he
care.
was actually could not be made in any way available to
An investigation.
for a personal one for any contact by William to him. So it really was protecting him. I will make sure we are busy doing those copies for you right now. But I wanted to ask you, William, there was somebody who was sort of between yourself, that you're working with a lady and the church.
Yes.
And she was your contact between the two, and that it was indirect to her communication that we got the original letter from them. So we will share with you both the original letter earlier in the year and last night's letter. There are some differences in those two letters. Yeah.
I think William. The question related to the response that you got from the church. You did get a response from the churches. No, you got from the church's lawyers here in South Africa.
Oh,
that you found was so deeply hurt.
Yes. The response that my attorneys told me that they got from their attorneys, the church's attorneys, was that there is no way that the British government would allow an old frail man to come and stand trial in South Africa. So that is their lawyers. So in other words, they are saying they will fight tooth and nail to ensure, my understanding, to ensure that he doesn't get extradited to South Africa. That is from their legal representative. But then last week, they said that the lawyer said he wants to deal with this. I don't. It has not yet been explained to me what dealing with this means. I have not since been in contact with my lawyers because I was busy with organizing this one. I'm hoping to hear from them anytime soon.
And just to reiterate, we want the transcripts from those proceedings of this investigation that led to this letter being written. Because if there was an investigation, it has to have been documented to come to this conclusion.
Yes.
Where are those transcripts?
And also,
I mean, it clearly states in the letter, William, that Father McCurtain violated your trust in him. It is absolutely written here in black and
but
white.
also it says which further makes me doubt about how the church is thinking, because now they say that he took advantage of you at an age when you cannot possibly have given your proper consent. That concerns me, because it seems to say that there is an age at which a congregant can give proper consent to a priest for sex.
And the word proper is also a concern, sort of like a little minimization. And just to point out that the three basic defenses of offenders are denial of fact, denial of impact, it wasn't so bad, and denial of responsibility, the devil made me do it. And we hear all of those.
And I think just also a sentence here for those who haven't got it. I cannot tell you how saddened I am to learn that this is how a fellow Jesuit behaved. It is totally incompatible with the gospel of respect for the vulnerable and for human dignity, which is the message we live to preach and serve. You, by contrast, have shown both dignity and compassion throughout your long struggle to come to terms with what he did. I am profoundly moved by your generosity.
Do you just want to mention the artist?
Sorry? Yes. I'm going to give it to you now. Yeah, we just on the following page.
It'll be on the email later.
Yeah. Do you just want to mention the artist?
Yes. Maybe contacted my colleague, after you heard we were going to hold this press conference. And you just maybe want to introduce yourself and just say why you felt you wanted to come. It was the first time at a press conference we ever had an artist say he'd like to come and just capture what was happening here today. So thank you very much. And we were very intrigued by what you were actually going to do. So if you could just maybe introduce yourself and maybe show us, or we have all been waiting to see your work. I know they've seen it, but we haven't seen it.
We haven't.
I'll keep you waiting a bit longer. But thank you very much for having me. I am Honest Lihle. I am from Swaziland. They say I'm one of the main artists in the kingdom. I don't know how far true that is. The reason why this was interesting to me, I work with the American Embassy in Swaziland on an annual program that is called, I'm getting it. We go by the name of the 4 Musketeers, which is four male artists. Myself, doing fine art painting. We have a musician. I'm sure some of you would know his song, he's been making around. We have a public speaker, and we have a fashion designer. We came together 3 years ago, looking at the plight that the women are going through and the children are going through with the abuse and everything. And we thought what we do with our crafts is a way of communicating certain messages that we could bring through to the audience, because people sometimes shy away from such. But if we bring them together in one space and we say we would like to use our craft in communicating these things. And the American Embassy liked what we were doing, so they came on board and they sponsored, and we've been having this going on for 3 years. Last year they went massive, because then we are part of the universities and we went to all the tertiary institutions to come and do this needs. I basically, just to cut it short, seem to have made a name for myself by doing, like I say, painting upon corporate, in doing this, specifically the translating what the event is about, the gist of the event, and I take it and bring it down for a piece. I just came off the job, yes, a stage alongside an award-winning artist again. I'm also the very first artist to paint live at the main stage of the MTN Bushfire in Swaziland. It's never been done before, and I am proud to say I was the first guy to do that this year. Just Also, earlier on this year, I did the Ubuntu Festival down in Mpumalanga, in Mbombela. And the piece specifically